There are quite a number of hazards which visually impaired people face every day on Britain's roads. The biggest risk in any environment where you're interacting with traffic is going to be cars.
Cars have made noises for years and people have been taught to use those noises to help them in day-to-day life. Taking those engines away, that takes a massive amount of independence and confidence away from visually impaired people.
When you take the traditional combustion engine out of the car, that is the dominant noise source up to somewhere between 20 and 30 kph. Once you take that noise source away, the cars become harder to hear coming. That can be difficult for anyone. It's not just the visually impaired people. Jaguar's Acoustic Vehicle Alert System is designed to fit in with regulation that's upcoming throughout the globe. Our system basically infills the noise at low speeds that's missing when you replace the combustion engine with an electric motor. We're going to give more acoustic information to pedestrians and road users. We've designed our sound to truly reflect the character and the styling of the I-PACE, but at the same time be really useful as an acoustic cue that people can recognise that there is a car around them. It's not just a flat sound. Obviously the car moves, it accelerates, it decelerates, it starts, it stops, and the sound must reflect that behaviour. The background of this is we do probably an awful lot more listening than we do looking. We certainly do an awful lot more listening than we realise, and there's a lot of sound is processed at a subconscious level.
I think the measures that Jaguar Land Rover has taken in introducing AVAS, the Acoustic Vehicle Alerting System, a year ahead of its mandatory requirement in 2019 is fantastic.
It's really important to have sound to help everyone recognise that there is a danger. It's not just those people with visual impairments.
My name's Ian Suffield. I'm an acoustics technical specialist with Jaguar Land Rover. Electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles are a great opportunity to reduce our in-city noise levels and actually make our cities an awful lot nicer place to be with the reduced pollution that they produce and the reduced noise levels as well. But we have noticed that when you take the engine away from the car, the traditional combustion engine out of the car, that is the dominant noise source up to somewhere between 20 and 30 kph. Once you take that noise source away, the car is inherently an awful lot quieter. By the time you're up to about somewhere between 20 to 30 kilometres an hour, the actual sound of the tyres on tarmac or the aeroacoustic noise of the car just moving through the air actually takes over as the main noise source. So the focus of our work here is just to reinforce the sound that's essentially missing when we go into a battery electric vehicle. Jaguar's Acoustic Vehicle Alert System is designed to fit in with regulation that's upcoming throughout the globe that recognises that electric cars, being quieter than normal combustion engine cars, are missing some of the sound cues that people rely upon to move around either cities or car parks in a safe way. The amount of work we've done with our sound design is to meet some very differing requirements. Obviously, we have to meet the regulations in there. the amount of work we've put into our sound design to make sure that the sound behaves as it should do, so that people perceive the information of the car's behaviour quite quickly and intuitively without being, it's nothing different or strange when we transfer to a majority of electric cars. We also have to meet the Jaguar's drivers' expectations, or our Jaguar customers' expectations, of super silent and super refined when they're low speed and pull away. And we have to convey the brand information of Jaguar to the outside of the car. People should know that, not just through the behaviour, but through the sound itself. It should convey Jaguarness. What this system does is it gives some acoustic cues that people will recognise that there's a car there even before they've looked. The background of this is we do probably an awful lot more listening than we do looking. We certainly do an awful lot more listening than we realise, and there's a lot of sound is processed at a subconscious level. If you take out those audio cues of there's a car coming towards you, then you put people at potentially increased risk in city spaces. The design process has worked with the styling group to make sure that our sound is bespoke for I-PACE and truly reflects the I-PACE character. But we then have to do an awful lot of putting the sounds actually on the car and making sure that that is perceptible for pedestrians or other road users. There's an awful lot of standing around while cars drive around you so that you can pick up where the car is, how fast the car is going, whether it's accelerating or decelerating. So it's not just a flat sound. Obviously, the car moves, it accelerates, it decelerates, it starts, it stops, and the sound must reflect that behaviour to get the acoustic information of what the car is doing, which is what's useful and what tells you that there's something moving around you. The Jaguar AVAS is fitted to all cars in all markets in advance of the legislation. We recognise that this is an important safety feature, and that's part of the reason that the driver doesn't have to worry about it, they can't interact with it, don't switch it off at all, because it's just there. I contacted Guide Dogs because I thought they would be able to bring us actually a unique perspective. We could have just designed the sound to meet the regulation and thought no more of it. But actually the perspective provided by the Guide Dogs Association is very useful and has been really enlightening to me.
My name's Alexandra Bomer, and I'm here today with my guide dog Cara, and we're looking at electric vehicles, assessing their safety with their sound, and ensuring that what we're picking up as totally blind and visually impaired people is enough information to be aware of where vehicles are. I find that the ease of assessing my situation has increased, or should I say decreased, over the last few years, whereas before I had the ability to assess my surroundings using light and dark. I now can't use that, so I am wholly reliant on sound and on the knowledge of my environment. It does affect my daily life. I have a busy life. I work full-time. I'm also a mother, and I do a lot of charity work in my spare time. So I have a number of different environments that I have to get to know, and I have to get to know them very quickly. I work in a busy environment. I live in a town that's very, very busy on a Saturday, and I do the school run. So I do all the things that other mums and dads do, but I just don't have the advantage of being able to see what's happening around me and have to make a judgment call in a split second whilst looking after my son and using my guide dog. In my everyday life, the most danger or concern is my daily walk into work or my commute into work, and also when I'm doing the school run and walking my son to school. The roads can be very, very busy at around the school drop-off time. Lots of traffic. You don't know what's coming. Buses, cars, lorries. And you have a number of quite dangerous and very busy crossings, some of which are using audible signals. Some have no signal at all, and you have to make a real judgment call when you're crossing. And there's an increasing number of electric vehicles on the university campus where I work. Again, assessing when it's safe to cross with all of that coming at you, and the sound of construction work is really quite difficult. The introduction of hybrid and electric vehicles when I'm commuting to and from work or just going about my daily life has been impacted recently. There are a number of hybrid vehicles that I use on a day-to-day basis if I have to use taxis. Generally, they are hybrid vehicles these days. Neighbours have electric cars, and when they're travelling at 0 to 30, which typically they will do in the streets where I live and around the schools, it's extremely hard to know that they're there. It makes a big difference when you're in a busy environment where traffic has to move slowly, because there is very little to give you a clue that something is in your way if you're using a dog and you're making the judgment call to cross. And also, when you're using a white cane and you're without your dog, you stand even less chance. So there are inherent dangers in those slow-go zones, and which is typically in any big town, or even in smaller towns when it's school drop-off and pick-up time. In the situations that we have at the moment, when I'm using my guide dog, she will always correct if I step out and there is a vehicle there. She will stop or refuse. I haven't had the experience where I've had a near miss yet, which is really good. But it is very much about the reliance and the trust with your dog to know what's happening. As good as I am in picking up sound, I can't pick up anything that's completely silent. So if you have a stop-start mechanism, there is no way that I would know the car was there. It's really important to have sound to help everyone recognise that there is a danger. It's not just those people with visual impairments or completely blind people. It's for those with other ailments or disabilities, any vulnerable road user really. Today I've experienced a test with an electric vehicle whereby we were standing waiting to hear the car come past. So the car drove past us emitting a low-level sound, which was quite easy to follow. When the sound wasn't there or the sound was different, it was much harder to follow that car, to know where it was and to be aware of its movement, its trajectory, its direction of travel. With the low-level sound switched on, it was much easier to follow all the way round. You're aware at all times where the car was, and that was really helpful.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm here today to test out and find out a bit more about Jaguar Land Rover's commitment to making electric vehicles safe and accessible for visually impaired people. So I use a guide dog to help me get around and to help me stay safe, because obviously I can't see what's in front of me, so it's a lot about using the dog and using my memory and using my ears as well to keep myself safe and heading in the right direction when I'm out and about. I think moving around busy outdoor environments when there's lots of people and traffic can be a bit of a safety nightmare and a bit concerning, especially as a lot of the time streets are changing every day and obviously roads are quite unpredictable. When I'm crossing roads, I'm having to use my ears a lot to hear where cars are, whether they've stopped, whether it's safe and clear for me to cross. So that's why it's really important that everything is noisy so that I don't have to rely on other people to keep me safe. The introduction of electric cars has been concerning. The few that I've come across, because I've not been able to hear them, a lot of the time I don't know they're there at all. So I started training with my new guide dog a few months ago, and I remember an incident quite clearly where obviously we're getting used to each other, and we were doing road crossings and practicing traffic, and we crossed over a road, and my trainer said to me, "Did you realise that you just crossed in front of a car?" And I had absolutely no idea because I couldn't hear it, and luckily it was fine. It was safe because the car was stopped and obviously waiting for me to cross over. But it really made me realise that I had absolutely no awareness, and if that driver hadn't been looking, then something else could have happened. Many people think that guide dogs are trained to tell you when it's safe to cross, but they're not. You have to judge that for yourself. But they are supposed to stop you if you make the wrong judgment. So she doesn't act differently as such, but I think it would make her a bit more hesitant because she would see them as an obstacle if they were there and I was trying to tell her to move forward. Cars have made noises for years, and blind people have been taught to use those noises to help them in day-to-day life, to follow the direction of traffic, to know where they're going down a road, to listen for car engines, to know when it's safe to cross a road. And taking those engines away, that takes a massive amount of independence and confidence away from visually impaired people navigating around and how they can access, their home areas and even areas they don't know so well. So making noises and electric cars mandatory would really help to eliminate that problem and that concern and make, areas accessible for blind people to access independently.
My name is John Welsman. I'm Policy Business Partner at Guide Dogs for Travel and Mobility. Guide Dogs is an organisation that supports children, adults with a vision impairment to support their mobility and independence. Daily, one of the major hazards is crossing the road, being mindful of being able to use controlled crossing points where you have confidence that the vehicles are going to stop for you, listening to those vehicles, making sure if you're using an uncontrolled point to get across the road that you are aware of all the vehicles around you. So those and things like cyclists and other pedestrians and things are always going to be hazards that vision impaired people have to negotiate their way around. I think the danger that electric vehicles pose for vision impaired people using Britain's roads are the fact that they're quiet. Now, there is some noise with those vehicles at higher speeds relatively around 12 to 20 miles an hour or over. Tyre noise, wind resistance, drivetrain noise will make those cars relatively as audible as some modern combustion engine vehicles. But if we're thinking about electric vehicles and maybe some of the newer combustion engine vehicles at slow speeds, they're very quiet. If you're thinking of a mixed environment like a car park or maybe a highly built up residential area, you can sometimes be walking through an environment where there are cars moving around at slow speed, and making sure that you can detect those things can be quite challenging. I think it's really important that sound generators are mandatory on all electric and hybrid cars moving forward, because I think there is an issue with those vehicles moving at slow speed, not being able to hear those vehicles when they're moving at slow speed. And also, I think the issue of vision impaired people traditionally, and I think culturally, have been aware of the sound of a combustion engine or a diesel or a petrol engine, and they know what those sound like. So we not only want a sound on those vehicles to indicate their presence, but we want that sound to be relatively replicating the sound of an engine, combustion engine, so that becomes familiar to people, so they understand it's a vehicle they're listening out for as opposed to any other type of sound. It's crucial for manufacturers like Jaguar Land Rover to roll out technology like the AVAS, the acoustic vehicle alerting systems, on their vehicles, because we need to make the environment safe for vision impaired people and other vulnerable road users. We as vision impaired people, as much as anybody else, like the room we're in today, it's lovely and quiet. Why make it more noisy than we need to make it? So if we can reduce the sound that vehicles in general make, we're all going to benefit from that, including vision impaired people. But obviously that comes at a cost. And the cost is that we need to be able to hear those vehicles. I think the measures that Jaguar Land Rover has taken in introducing AVAS, the acoustic vehicle alerting system, a year ahead of its mandatory requirement in 2019 is fantastic. It sends out a message to the motor industry that it's something that can be done. It's something that can be done on high performance sports utility vehicles like the I-PACE. It's something that is important, and promoting that importance for vulnerable pedestrians and road users is something that we both can do together. Us as an organisation who is a leader in our area of mobility and independence for vision impaired people, and Jaguar Land Rover as being an iconic brand who really produce some fantastic high performance vehicles which are adapted and are accessible to vision impaired people in the sense of making them audible at slow speed.